Welcome to Nowhere, Chapter 21. The camp was silent and deserted as I stumbled back to our cabin. The full moon was casting eerie shadows over the glistening mud. I'd left my phone behind in the mad scramble to get Nadia to the hospital, so I'd no idea what time the time was. It felt like the middle of the night. The dim light of a solar lamp shone out from the mass of cabins. It could only have come from ours. Iman must have been straining her ears to hear me coming, because she opened the door before I'd time to knock. "What's happening? Why did you take so long?" "She's going to be all right. Sort of." I was struggling to take off my filthy shoes. "What do you mean, sort of? Where's Ma?" "Give me a chance. Just let me get cleaned up." Iman ran to the little kitchen area, while I struggled out of my mud-caked clothes and hauled on my pyjamas. Ford was lying in a tumble in a mattress, fast asleep. But Moose had been waiting up with Iman. He was watching me impatiently. "Are you going to take all night?" he said crossly. I flopped down beside him. A wave of exhaustion was swamping me. "Tell you everything in the morning," I said sleepily, sliding sideways so that I could lie down. Musa prodded me up again. "No, you don't. Talk now." It felt as if hours had passed before they let me go to sleep, and even when at last my eyes were closing, I could hear their urgent voices talking on and on. I woke much later than usual. Iman was already dressed in her outdoor clothes and was standing in front of the broken piece of mirror I'd found behind a stall in the Champs-Élysées, fixing her hijab in place. I sat up groggily. "Where's Musa? And how come Ford's sleeping so late?" "He was out for ages trying to get a message to the hooligans so they can show me the way to the hospital. He crashed out again when he got back. Musa's gone to the mosque. He says the imam knows someone whose sister a cardiologist in Damascus. He's going to find out more about what's wrong with Nadia." I struggled to my feet, yawning and stretching. Why doesn't he just go to the hospital and ask Dr. Jean? He doesn't see why I should trust a foreign woman. She's a children's doctor, isn't she? What if she doesn't know much about hearts? She was halfway to the door, a couple of bulging plastic bags in her hands. "Hang on a minute," I said, ferreting around to find Baba's old trousers. "I'll come with you. What's in all those bags anyway?" "Clean clothes for Ma, washing things, her phone." "Don't come, Omar. Stay here and keep an eye on Fuad. He's really upset. I'd text you, but my battery's dead." There's a knock on the door. "That'll be one of the boys. Tiger, probably. There's a bit of breakfast for you and the tea's still warm. See you later." And she was gone. There wasn't much for breakfast, just a few flaps of stale bread. I took them and went to sit down again, moving quietly so as not to wake Ford. I looked round the cabin. I wasn't used to being in it without either Ma or Iman. It was almost as if I was seeing it for the first time. We'd done our best with it. We'd managed to acquire some cardboard boxes to use as rickety tables, the piece of mirror, and a broken chair Iman had found at the school, which I'd patched up with a splint. Colourful blankets we'd brought with us from Syria, which we'd laid out to the mattresses, were the only cheerful things, but they, like everything else, were hard to keep clean and dry. I could never call the cabin home. It was a cramped, mean sort of place, and the only good thing about it was that there were no lunatics outside with their fingers on triggers, sitting in tanks or flying around in helicopters, getting ready to blast us into bits of nothing. England, Dr. Jean had said. London. I tried to imagine it. I wasn't the same silly kid who dreamed of Norway with Rasul. England was something that might actually happen. The thought of it was exciting, but scary too. They'll make me go back to school in England, I thought. I'll be the stupid one again, the thicko, the ignorant lump. It would be even worse than any school I'd been to before, because I wouldn't understand a word of English. I tried out in my head the few words I knew. "Hello, my name is Omar. I am 15 years old. Manchester United. What is your name?" I tried to remember my old selling rhymes. "Antiques, nice and cheap," I muttered. It was no good. I'd forgotten the rest. "It won't happen anyway," I told myself. "No one gets out of the camp and goes to Europe, bang, just like that." Fuad stirred and opened his eyes. He looked unseeingly at me for a moment. then sat up with a jerk. I fell asleep, Omar. Where's Ma? At the hospital with Nadia. Did she die? No, the doctor says she should get better, but she's got something wrong with her heart. She's got to have an operation. I realised guiltily that I hadn't thought about Nadia much since I'd woken up. Fuad nodded. I know about operations. Scorpion's Ma had one in Dara. It made her better. When's Ma coming back? I don't know. Musa and Iman have gone to find out. We've got to wait for them. Is there any breakfast? A bit, I think. Go and look. He came back with some bread in his hand and sat down beside me. When will the operation be finished, Omar? Is Nadia coming home today? No. The doctor says she's got to get better first, and then go and have the operation in England. We're all going there too. His mouth flew open. You mean leave the camp? There was a panic in his eyes. We can't. It's safe here. No one's trying to kill us. I don't think anyone's going to try and kill us in London. How do you know? There might be a war going on there too. We can't leave here. Baba did and he died. Tears were spilling out of his eyes. I like it here. Omar, the hooligans are here and we're doing stories at school. I was shocked. You can't like it here, Fuad. It's awful. Think of how nice it was in our old house in Bosra. I can't remember Bosra, he screamed. You can't make me go. You'll all have to leave without me. I gave up. Don't worry about it, I told him. I bet it doesn't happen after all. Musa and Iman came back together. He had gone to the hospital after the mosque. I'd been fretting with impatience. Was Nadia really going to be all right? Had I imagined the whole thing about going to England? Why were they taking so long? When at last they came back, I could see by their faces that the news wasn't good. She's holding her own, Iman said, unbuttoning her coat, but she's not out of danger. My heart kicked with fright. I thought the worst was over. That English doctor? I don't know if she's any good, Musa said. What does she know? She's not a heart specialist. I wasn't sure what to think. I trusted Dr. Jean. Maybe Musa was right to be suspicious. Ma's feeling terribly guilty, said Iman. She keeps saying she should have noticed that something was wrong. She doesn't want to leave Nadia, but I've persuaded her to come home this evening. I'm going to cook her a proper meal, then I'll go to the hospital for the night, so she can come back here and get some sleep. Did you see her? Nadia, I mean, I asked. Only through the door. They wouldn't let us go near. She looked so tiny, Omar, with tubes sticking out of her little arm, and... She broke off and wiped her eyes. I suddenly couldn't bear to stay in the cabin any longer. I'll fetch the bread ration, I said. Come on, Fuad, I'll drop you off at school. The day passed horribly slowly. I did my usual chores, filling the jerry cans with water, queuing up for bread and fetching our weekly ration of lentils, rice and pasta from the distribution centre. I came back to the cabin at last, loaded down with bags, to find that Ma had come in before me. She and Musa were standing face to face in the middle of the cabin, and I could tell that I'd burst right into the middle of a furious row. It's not right for us to run away to England like a bunch of cowards, Musa was shouting. We ought to be helping the revolution in Syria. We should be trying to get home. What home? Snapped Ma. There is no home. Haven't you seen what they've done to Dara and Bosra? Don't you want Nadia to have a life-saving operation? Don't you care about your sister? A red flush spread over Musa's cheeks. Of course I do. But what do you know about this Englishwoman doctor? If she's so good at her job, what's she doing here in Zaatari? I don't trust her. So what do you propose to do? Ma's hands were on her hips and her head was thrust forward. Plunge straight back into the war and travel all the way up to the children's hospital in Damascus? We'd never get that far alive. We should wait here, Musa said. We ought to get a second opinion anyway. I'll see what I can find out on the internet. Nadia can't travel until she's well enough. It gives us time to think out other options. We've still got Iman's necklace, don't forget. It should be enough to pay for a surgeon. Don't worry, Ma. I'll decide what to do. No, exploded Ma. You won't decide anything. I've had enough, do you hear? Of the men in this family making decisions to suit themselves. If Dr. Jean can get us to London, one of the best children's surgeons in the world, we'll have the chance to save your little sister's life. And your other sister. Have you thought about her? We haven't got her necklace. It belongs to Iman. She's the one who'll decide what to do with it. I was standing stock still with one shoe off and one shoe on, too stunned to move. I could see that Musa was shocked too. Of course I want what's best for the girls, he began. But in England, We'd just be a bunch of refugees living on charity. You know what the British say about Arabs and Muslims. They think we're all crazy terrorists. Think about it, Ma. We're Syrians. We need to stay close to our country. We should be proud to... Proud? Ma interrupted furiously. You think being here should make us proud? Where do you think this cabin came from? Charity. Where did Omar get today's bread ration from? They both swiveled round to face me. I put my hands up and stepped back, nearly tripping over my discarded shoe. Charity, Ma almost shouted. Anyway, it's too late, Musa. I've asked Dr. Jean to go ahead. She's contacted UNHCR. They're asking for asylum seekers' visas for us. She's told them it's urgent, and before you say any more rude things about foreign women doctors, one of the nurses told me more about Dr. Jean. She's a famous children's specialist who's working this camp for charity. She stopped. Musa said nothing. At last he shrugged and turned away. Ma breathed out. She had won. I could see her deflating slowly like a balloon when the air comes out of it, and I realised that I'd just witnessed a massive turning point in our family. Musa had been toppled off the throne. He'd only just inherited, and Ma had taken control. The weeks had followed the strangest of all, our time in Jordan. Iman and Ma took turns to be with Nadia in the hospital. She was getting better, but too slowly to travel for a while yet. I felt nervous every time I went to see her. I couldn't play with her like I usually did, because she was too weak. And if I pulled faces to make her laugh, she started coughing and I felt bad. Musa was better with her. He sat by her bed for hours and told her stories, not minding if she fell asleep in the middle. Dr. Jean had started a process that sometimes scared me stiff and sometimes filled me with excitement. Sometimes we thought we'd been on a plane to London in a couple of days' time, and the next day there'd be a hitch, and it looked as if we'd be stuck in Zaatari forever. The day Nadia came out of hospital was the best we'd ever had in Zaatari. We all went to fetch her. Ma held her as carefully as if she was made of china. Iman and I walked on each side, carrying Ma's bag and Nadia's clothes, with Musa and Fuad following on behind. It hadn't rained for a while, and the mud had started to harden. The weather was warming up. Soon the floods and slime would be gone, and the clouds of dust would swirl about the blistering desert. The nurses and Dr. Jean all came out to say goodbye to Nadia. They'd become fond of her while she'd been in the hospital. Musa stepped forward when we were ready to go. He swallowed hard and said as clearly as he could, "On behalf of my mother and my family, I want to thank you all very much for taking such good care of my sister." Before he'd quite finished, Ma dashed forward and flung her arms around Dr. Jean's neck, and they stood there laughing and crying together. When we got back to the cabin, our neighbours were waiting for us, along with Ali, who'd somehow managed to get hold of a cake. They crowded round Nadia, petting her, and for a moment I actually felt sorry that we were going to leave Zaatari camp. I actually felt as if we belonged. Our visas came through the next day, and then our air tickets came too. There were 7 days until our departure, then 6, then 5. There was no need to worry about packing. We had almost nothing to take with us. But there were still things I needed to think about, and top of the list was Riyadh. He'd burst into tears when I told him I was leaving. "You can't go, you can't leave me," he gasped out between heaving sobs. He took to follow me round like a dog. It was exasperating, but sort of touching too. I kept trying to think of how I could help him, but I couldn't come up with a single idea. But the day before we were due to leave, Riyadh found a way to help himself. I was on my way down the Champs-Élysées to see if I could persuade the new owner of Abu Radwan's shop to charge our mobiles along with Musa's laptop. Riyadh, as usual, was sticking to me as close as a shadow, but suddenly he darted off round a corner. I grabbed his collar just in time before he disappeared into the maze of cabins. "Where do you think you're going?" "I'm hiding. I can't go past that shop. The man, he'll see me." So I don't want him to." He was looking guilty. I frowned. "You stole from him, didn't you?" He nodded reluctantly. I gave him a shake. "Riyadh, you've got to stop being scared. You're a reformed character now, remember? You've turned over a new leaf, made a fresh start." "Yes, but Omar, he doesn't know that, does he? How many shops along here have you got to avoid?" "1 or 2, 3 or 4. Quite a lot, actually. Most of them never caught me. He did, though. You can't go on hiding from people forever. You'll have to sort it out. How can I? If he catches me, he'll beat me up. No, he won't. Not if you do it right. What do you want me to do then? I looked down into his thin, anxious face and wanted to kick myself. Why had I saddled myself with this dreadful child? Now he was looking at me like a hopeful dog. Okay, Riyadh, listen. Here are 2 things I'm going to say to you that you're never going to forget. He nodded, his face serious. Honesty is the best policy. That's number 1. It means you don't lie or steal or cheat, especially if you're a businessman. Say it after me. Honesty is the best. Go on. Honesty is the best policy. It means the best way of doing things. All right. What's the other thing? If you've done something wrong or make a mistake, you have to put it right. He took a step backwards. You mean? Yes, I do mean. You've got to go and say sorry to that man. He was poised to bolt. I took a firm grip on his arm. I can't, Omar. He'll kill me. I put on my sternest look. What did you steal? Her slides, my sisters, and a couple of other things. I shook my head sorrowfully. You really are an idiot, Riyadh. You committed the crime for the sake of a few cheap hair slides. He looked indignant. It wasn't a crime, Omar, and they were nice. Stealing is a crime. People who steal are thieves. You were a thief. Right. We start from here. I fished in my pocket, brought out a few of my precious coins and put them into Riyadh's grubby hand. Then I gave him a little push. Go on. Go on and what? Go and confess what you did to that man and say sorry and give him the money. I had to grab him again or he'd have been off and away. No, he squealed. You go and talk to him. I let him go and held my hands up. I'm not going to do that, Riyadh. And I can't make you. If you want to grow up to be a good person, you've got to do it yourself. He was looking down his filthy bare toes. They squirmed around his plastic flip-flops. What do I have to say? Work it out for yourself. Go on. I'll be right behind you. I had to admire Riyadh at that point, I must admit. He squared his shoulders, puffed out his thin chest, and trod resolutely up to the front of the shop. Then when I turned round, I saw his face for the first time. He was big and ugly and looked terrifying. He was setting out some bottles of nail varnish among the combs and lotions and fancy hijab pins on the counter. Please, sir, Riyadh began nervously. The man looked down at him. You, he barked furiously. Back again, you little thief. You touch one thing in this shop and I'll tear your head off. Riyadh flinched but held his ground. Please, sir, I've come to say sorry and pay for what I took. The man snorted. This is a trick, isn't it? How can you pay me for all the cream and shampoos and lipsticks? Those weren't me, said Riyadh. It was the others and the hooligans. The who? I only took 3 hair slides for my little sisters, a nail file and a plastic rose for my ma. He held my coins out with a trembling hand. The man took them reluctantly, checked them over and put them into his pocket. Enough. Just, he said grudgingly. Why are you doing this anyway? I'm doing it, Riyadh said carefully, because honesty is the best policy, I prompted him. The man turned his glare on me. Don't I know you? I've been working with Abu Radwan, I said. He's been training me to be an electrician. He nodded, and I could see that his glare wasn't as frightening as I thought. Abu Radwan's a good man. I hear he's leaving. Yes, I said, and so am I with my family, any day now. He looked puzzled. What's this boy to you then? He's my cousin, Riyadh said proudly before I could answer. I nudged him. Honesty, Riyadh, remember? I know you're not really my cousin no more, but I wish you were. I really, really wish you weren't going away. The shopkeeper was losing interest in us. I'm helping him, I said hastily, because he's a good lad at heart, and his dad's dead and his ma can't cope, and he's got 3 little sisters. Same as thousands of others in the camp, the man said unimpressed. He was tearing open a box of children's jewellery and was starting to set the pieces out on the counter. Riyadh watched with a critical eye. If you put those little pink bracelets in the front, he said, the smallest girls will be able to see, and pester their mums to buy them. The man gave him a sharp look. You like these sorts of things, do you? Riyadh looked wistful. Yes, I love pretty things. You've got some nice stuff here. The man scowled again. Can't sell it though, can I? No one's got any money. I could almost read the thoughts revolving around in Riyadh's head. It's not just the money, sir, he said. Women like my mum with little kids, they can't easily get to the Champs-Élysées. But if you let me make up a box with a few nice things in it and sell them to me for a really good price, I'll go round the cabins up our way and there'll be a bit of profit for you and me as well. I could hardly stop myself from bursting out laughing. Riyadh, where on earth will you get the money from to buy a box of stuff? You haven't got a cent. He'll steal it, growled the shopkeeper. Once a thief, I won't, Riyadh said earnestly. I'm a reformed character. I've turned over a new leaf and I'm making a fresh start. A muscle twitched in the man's cheek. And did you hear what your non-cousin said? If you don't steal the money, where will you get it from? Riyadh turned a blazing smile on me. I'm going to borrow it from Omar. I'd seen that one coming. And when do you propose to pay me back? I asked. Not yet. I can't yet. But I will one day, Omar. I swear it. I'm going to save and save what I don't have to give to Ma. And when we go home to Syria, I'm going to have a shop full of beautiful ladies' things like this one. And I'll be able to buy a house and look after Ma. Always. The breath caught in my throat. I recognised the dream in his eyes. I was looking at my younger self. The boy who'd built castles in the air and packs of flimsy postcards. Riyadh would never make more than a few cents from sales around the cabins. But who was I to stop him trying? All right, I said gruffly. I'll do it on one condition. You've got to go to school and learn how to read and write and do your sums. Now, how much do you reckon you'll need? When I got back to the cabin, I found Musa there on his own. Ma's taken Nadi to the mosque, he said. Iman's going to pick Ford up from school. Did you get my laptop charged? Yes, cost me a fortune. Everyone round here seems to think I'm a millionaire. When are you going to pay me back? He flashed with a smile. When I'm a professor of political science at Oxford University. In your dreams, loser. He shrugged. It's all we've got now, isn't it? Dreams. There were voices outside. Iman was back. Musa, she called out. Come outside. The hooligans want to talk to you. Ford came into the cabin, clutching a bunch of papers. Miss gave me all my drawings to take to England, he said proudly. Look, Omar. I picked up the first one. It showed a tank with a streak of yellow light coming out of the barrel, and people lying in front of it in pools of red. When did you do this? I asked him. When we first came, I think. Look, I did this one yesterday. Miss said it was really good. I held this picture out, trying to make sense of it. That's an aeroplane, is it? Of course it is. Can't you see the wings? And those people inside the windows, are they us? Yes, silly. And what's the horse doing in the corner? It's because I like horses, and cats, and rabbits. I handed it back to him. They're very good, Fuad. Do you think children are allowed to draw pictures in school in England? He asked, looking anxious. Why does everyone keep asking me questions I can't answer? I thought. Aloud I said, you bet, Fuad, with felt tip pens and everything. Outside I could hear Cobra's high-pitched voice shouting, Tell us a story, Musa. Fuad dropped his pictures and ran to the door. He left it open. I could see Musa settling himself on the step outside and the hooligans squatting in a ring around him. Fuad squirmed in between lion and scorpion. Once upon a time, began Musa, there was this incredibly handsome prince who had cerebral palsy, and who spoke in a kind of interesting way that only special people could understand. That's not a story, Colin Wolf. That's you. Tell us a proper one. All right. Once upon a time, there was a group of extremely fierce and dangerous hooligans who decided to do great deeds in the world. There was a tiger, a wolf, a lion, a cobra, piped up Cobra. Musa wagged a finger at him. Don't interrupt. The boys wriggled happily, then settled down with their mouths open as the story got underway. We had a strange last meal in an almost empty cabin. Ma had given away all our remaining supplies of food to Riyadh, along with pans, plates, cutlery, bucket, water cans, heater and stove the UN had supplied us with. But our neighbours had brought in so many dishes for us that our supper that night was the best we'd had since we'd arrived in the camp. We had to be at the main gate by 5 o'clock in the morning to be in the transport to the airport in Amman before 7:30. Our few bags were packed and our clothes, which were as clean as Ma and Iman could make them, were ready to put on. Best try to get some sleep, yawned Ma, settling down with Nadi in the crook of her arm. I've set the alarm on my phone for 4. I lay down and pulled a blanket over me. I couldn't sleep but lay watching through the cabin's small high window the clouds that were drifting across the face of the moon. On the next mattress Musa was tossing and turning. Are you awake? I whispered, when I'd given up all hope of going to sleep. Of course I am. How long does the flight to London take? Do you know? About 5 hours. So that means, let me see, in 11 hours we'll be in London. Well done, genius. We were silent for a while. Musa, I said at last, do you still think we're running away from our duty by going to Britain? Of course we're running away, but it's too late now. We've got to go for Nadia's sake anyway. I see that now. There was a rustle from the far side of the cabin. In the faint moonlight I could see Iman sitting up. What are you two whispering about? I sat up too. We can't sleep. Neither can I. Come over here then. I made room for her and Musa on my mattress, and we sat side by side hugging our knees. Musa, I'd have sold my necklace if we'd had to get an operation for Nadia here. You know that, don't you? Said Iman. Of course I do, but Ma was right, it's yours. And don't think, brother dear, that you and Ma are going to marry me off to the first Syrian man you meet in London. How did you guess? Said Musa. It's my sole purpose in life to get rid of you. She gave him a nudge that nearly toppled him over. I had to hold him up again. At least there'll be boys queuing up to marry you, he said. Let's face it, I'll never find a girl who'll look at me. Don't you believe it, I said a bit too heartily. Clever guy like you, they'll... Shut up, Omar, he said bitterly. Nadia coughed. Ma half woke, murmured something and pulled her closer. Are you scared? Whispered Iman. I am. Terrified, said Musa. I feel as if I'm looking over the edge of a cliff, I said, and I can't see the bottom. The dark cloud that had been covering the sky moved away, and moonlight flooded into the cabin. What's the time? I asked. Iman angled her wrist to the light to look. 5 to 4. Time to get up. This is it. She reached out and grasped my hand. I put out my other one to take hold of Musa's. Do you think we'll be all right in Britain? I whispered. Do you think they'll like us? They didn't answer.